It is Friday the 13th of August, 2021.
Ooh.
A dark day for some, at least, if you believe that Friday the 13th is Monster Day. But it's been a bad week, if not a bad day for Apple, Keith. This is the week that Apple finally began to sort of enter perhaps Facebook territory in terms of its bad PR, because rather than Facebook or Google, Apple's turning into Big Brother, or so it seems.
It's almost like they took their eye off the ball and somebody
Or maybe they
deep
kept their eye on the ball too carefully. That's the problem.
could be like Harry Kane, you mean?
Yeah. Don't mention Harry Kane.
A painful subject.
Talk about a Friday the 13th.
Yes, Apple has been trying hard to get itself up to speed with how child pornography is dealt with pretty much globally. And for a long time, most internet platforms have been able to match images in the cloud with an image database of missing or abused children. And Apple hasn't been doing that. And this week they announced that they now will be, but with a twist. They basically announced three things. The first is that they're going to be scanning everything that's in iCloud, looking for what they call fingerprints, and then matching those fingerprints with similar fingerprints from the abused and missing children database. The second thing they announced is they're also going to be doing that on the phone when you use pictures in messages. And the third thing they announced is that parents will be able to opt their children in to having any messages they send or receive scanned in a similar way. And it led to, the populist version would be Apple is spying on us all. And that became the dominant meme.
Yeah, but no different from a fintech company spying on us if they suspect that we are buying or selling nuclear weapons or illicit drugs. To me, it doesn't sound that bad. I don't really understand what the fuss is.
Well, I think if they would have, here's the problem. There are governments and laws, and now there is very, very good image recognition technology. And child pornography is clearly a use case that most people would approve of. The problem is this very same technology can be used to enforce any laws in any country where images are involved. So, for example, if the Chinese government wanted to scan for pictures of Uyghurs who were political activists and made that the law, Apple clearly would be quite capable of performing that service, and under the law in China would have to, and so would be faced with a leave China or obey the law kind of mandate.
But that's another issue. I don't see what that's got to do with child pornography. I mean, that's always going to be the case. You can always have this God view on these tech companies. I mean, the same with Facebook and Google. They can find out everything about what we're doing if they want.
Well, it really comes down to whether you want your phone. This is the new bit. Your phone is being scanned in real time.
But if you're watching or trading in child pornography, then you've got to accept the consequences. I don't understand what the big deal is.
But what if you're an enemy of the law and of the government, and we would consider you a legitimate enemy of the government, but the government wants to use this
Apple is not just let's be clear. What is Apple providing? Are they giving it to the government? Are they giving it to the Chinese government or the Iranian government or the Russian government?
If they find positive matches over a certain threshold, you are
of child pornography, not of political opposition.
Yeah, but I don't know if you can do this, Andrew, but I want you to separate the use case, which I think most people would find fine, from the application of the very same technology to other use cases, which we wouldn't find fine.
But we knew that. But what I don't understand is, everybody knew they had this capability.
No, it's new. By the way, it's really hard. I worked at Nova Fora back in 2005 trying to do pattern matching with some of the world's
Yeah.
leading
But it
computer.
doesn't surprise me given the nature of AI and the ubiquity of these
Yeah,
platforms and their ability to manage data and images. So this was kind of inevitable, wasn't it?
it's kind of inevitable, but it does give rise to, basically, what are your rights to privacy once this is out? And what should they be? What should your right to privacy be? Because clearly nothing is private if the government says it isn't now.
Well, I don't understand how it would work. So let's take the Russian case. Let's say someone is doing something in Russia using an iPhone, somehow undermining Putin. Would the Putin regime know about this without Apple's support? So it would require Apple to tell the Putin people what somebody is doing on their iPhone, right?
Yeah, that won't happen. So that would
Okay,
be
but give me. You talked about a use case that you're
yeah.
comfortable with. Give me a use case that you're not comfortable with that's conceivable.
So a conceivable use case would be a government
Now,
that
give me a
has.
name. You can't be
Okay,
abstract. Give me the name of any government.
let's say I don't know, the British government wants to find pictures of the following 50 wanted, in quotes, suspected terrorists, who are all Muslim, and says to Apple, you have to scan for photos of these people. Here are the photos, go and fingerprint them.
When you
And
say
that,
you have to, I'm not sure that's
you
they
make
would
it a law. No,
request it.
you make it the law. It has to be a law like child pornography is. So obviously, bad governments do make bad laws all the time. You make it the law, and once it's the law, a company either has to comply or be punished. And so Apple could quite clearly scan every photo and look for these terrorists.
When you say look for these terrorists, what does that mean? You mean
Well, the word "look" is part of the problem in the messaging. Apple gave the impression through bad messaging they were looking at photos, but they're not actually looking at photos. What they're doing is they're what's called hashing the photos, which is to say they're looking at things like colors, shapes, light, and they're
well?
extracting.
But okay, let's use a better because the Muslim terrorist thing's boring. Let's use something more concrete. You and I, Keith, both know that there's a tremendous problem with people posting racist images and remarks on social media against black footballers in England. Could Apple help the government or the FA on that front? And what would be wrong with that? It forces people to be accountable for their behavior. I don't see the problem with it.
Apple's able to look at whatever you do on an iPhone,
Right.
just like Google can look at whatever you do on an Android phone. Now, lots of it's encrypted, so they don't literally look at it.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. So images are the best example. Words are a bit different. If they're encrypted, you can't really see inside.
So the images, I still don't get your thing with Muslims. What are you saying, that the Apple would be looking for men with beards waving Kalashnikovs? I mean,
No, it's the exact. No, it's better than that. I don't know if you've used Apple Photos recently, but for example, if you show it a picture of one of your children, it'll find every picture of that child. Now, it doesn't do that by looking at the pictures. It does it by creating a pattern and matching it. So
but if Apple then was able to, through this technology, find pictures of young men trading or distributing images, photos of other young men with Kalashnikovs in the hills of Syria or Afghanistan, is that necessarily a bad thing? I don't see the problem. I think it would be a helpful law enforcement thing.
I think it's because you're struggling to find use cases that you would approve of. But I bet you can think of use cases you would disapprove of. What about
I can't, because it
what about
requires Apple to be in bed with nasty governments, which I don't believe they would.
no? Apple has to comply with the law in every country in the world. Actually, that's one of the differences between Apple and Google. If you remember, Google pulled out of
Yeah.
China because it
I
was.
think the China thing is probably your best case, where if the China government said to Apple, I want to know, or we want to know examples of people trading in Uyghur imagery of some sort or another, militant Uyghur imagery, then it becomes more complicated.
I actually have a more significant disagreement, which is it's like the parent-child relationship where the population are treated as children and the technology acts as the parent, you know, checking on us. I don't know if we really want technology
Well,
to
you don't have
check
to have an
on us.
iPhone. It's your
And
choice,
and
right?
I
It's a big
also
deal.
don't know if we want our technology provider to report things to government um, under any circumstances. So,
Under any circumstances. So if Apple
well,
finds someone's trying to build a nuclear weapon,
I
you
think
wouldn't want
unless
them to report them.
that's for the Secret Service to figure out, not for your tech provider.
So if Apple somehow stumbled on this through the use of this new technology, that people exchanging images of the inside of nuclear weapons, and they had some association with a militant group, you think that it's not the business of tech companies they just turn a blind eye, and we wake up the next morning and a
Well,
city's been destroyed.
what I'd like to see is that they're legally forced to turn a blind eye by having a Bill of Rights for the individual not to be snooped on. And so I'd like individuals to have the right to privacy. And the minute you don't have the right to privacy, and it's, by the way, always child porn that's used to justify ending privacy, always, then that's the slippery slope, right? Which is the point made by Daring Fireball in this week's newsletter. It's the slippery slope. And
Well,
so
it's a slippery slope if you're a libertarian like you. If you're a non-libertarian like me, I'm more than happy for Apple to be policing
actually, I'm not.
pedophiles and terrorists. Anyway, let's move on, because I think
Yeah.
we've done this one to death. To me, it's not a big deal. To you, it is. We'll have to disagree on that one. Second piece in the newsletter, which I found really interesting, is you say the dollar is going private. Fascinating. We've been circling around this one for a number of different episodes. What's happening with the privatization of the US dollar, Keith?
Well, literally nothing is yet happening. So this is an article on Axios, which is a credible publication, responding to the plans of a company called Circle to become a bank and to be regulated by the Federal Reserve and the Officer of the Control of the Currency and the FDIC. So Circle is the creator of something called USDC, which is in crypto a stable coin mapped to the dollar. And we've seen in recent weeks the governor of the Federal Reserve going on the record to say that stable coins are probably a better digital dollar than a government version would be. So now that Circle is applied to become a bank, this article charts the path where USDC could actually become the digital dollar.
It's fascinating. And Circle is founded by Jeremy Allaire. I didn't even know about. Why isn't it a bigger deal? Is it a big deal in fintech circles?
It's a huge deal. It's people who speculate in cryptocurrencies use USDC as a place to go to protect their gains when they think the market's going to go down. So it's kind of like selling and going into the dollar.
So it's a sort of piece. So Circle is a piece of the new plumbing of the crypto world.
It is. And it goes along with something called Uniswap. Uniswap is where you can swap Bitcoin for USDC instead of selling and buying, which means that you, I think, strictly speaking, under the tax laws, you haven't made a trade. So it's like a safe resort to park your value in. And yeah, Jeremy Allaire, for those who don't know, was the founder of Macromedia back in the day.
I mean, a real old timer. He's someone I've seen in lots of different startups. So
Yep.
this is and this is part of the Coinbase infrastructure as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and Kevin Werbach, who was Esther Dyson's partner in her conference back in the day, writes a really interesting piece about decentralized tech is not neutral because it's programmed by humans who have an agenda. And so he's basically saying the vision where tech can be trusted because it's trustless is only true insofar as the humans that wrote it are not bad actors. And so he's kind of introducing doubt into the viability of fully distributed platforms to manage.
Yeah, well, we've been through. I mean, we've learned from that. He's absolutely right. He didn't used to be in that camp. He's a new recruit to recognizing that tech can be dangerous when written by libertarians. What about crypto and Biden and the politics in DC? Because crypto now is entering into mainstream politics, although it's kind of confusing. There's a nice piece which I saw by Ezra Klein on the way in which the Senate melted down over crypto. The New York Times piece.
Yeah, so I mean, Ezra Klein, if you listen to his podcast, he's an extremely smart, clear thinker, and he makes the obvious point using examples that the senators do not understand crypto in any
surprise. They don't understand the internet, let alone crypto.
He then points out that nonetheless they were prepared to kill the infrastructure bill based on opinions about crypto, which became very controversial. And in the course of doing that, Ezra Klein does a really good job, by the way, of explaining various elements of crypto as a kind of an explainer stroke historical context. So it's a very good piece that you found. And he then makes the point that at the end of the infrastructure bill, when it was pretty much agreed not to cripple crypto, when it came to a vote to accept the compromise between the two sides, a random senator tried to add in a $50 billion military spending commitment, which everyone was against. And under the rules of the Senate, that meant that the compromise on crypto was null and void.
That's what Apple should be doing, is exposing random senators who are porking up our politics. And what about Klobuchar? Amy Klobuchar, the blonde from the Midwest, rather chubby little blonde. She's got involved in this too, hasn't she?
I always thought she had brown hair, but maybe you're right.
I fantasize about her as a blonde. Maybe she does have brown hair.
I don't know, Andrew. That's you're getting pretty close to a line there. I think.
Yeah, I think Apple's going to report me. I'll be in. We'll have to do this next one from jail.
It'll be Restream that reports you. They'll be snooping. Anyways, there's there's been a whole spate of bills introduced. This is another one, and this one is a bill saying that Google and Apple both have to allow other app stores on their phones, not just their own. Now, in the case of Google, it's kind of a moot point because Google lets you what's called sideload apps that are not in the App Store. You can just download them like you can on a Mac or Windows, but Apple doesn't. This bill is asking for sideloading to become a right, which for those of us who understand the way hacking works, is kind of a nightmare scenario for the folks.
Amy Klobuchar is seems to be someone who, I don't know if she understands tech, but she's definitely jumping on the anti-tech bandwagon. Keith, your favorite subject, where is venture capital going? Every week we have to deal with this, but I'm going to give you the mic again because I just have to actually run off for 2 seconds. But tell everyone what's happening with venture capital this week. I'll be back in 2 seconds.
He's going to the bathroom, guys. He just forgot to go earlier. That's probably what it is. So this is a story actually by, familiar name, right? Jeanne Thier. Notice that accent on the E there. Jenny Tier, my good wife, has followed up on Sam Lessin's article from last week, where Sam predicted that venture investors are going to have to stop doing what they're doing and do something else instead due to the success of the large growth investors invading the venture space. So Jenny writes a response to that, pointing out, quite similar to my editorial from last week, that is not going to happen and that there's plenty of scope still in venture. I think it's probably the first time Jenny and I have agreed on something for a very, very long time. And I back that up, with a bunch of other articles which are kind of on topic. This is one on Bloomberg about hedge funds wanting to rule the discovery of unicorns, and it talks about Tiger Global and Hill House Capital. This is one where SoftBank, which reported its earnings last week, Massa, the founder of SoftBank, is putting more of his own money into the SoftBank fund, which, by the way, the Vision Fund 2 is pretty much only SoftBank's money. All of that leads to an overview where 61 billion has been invested in 53 new unicorns in July alone, which is huge numbers. So, value creation and venture investing is booming, even in Sweden, which apparently is becoming the Silicon Valley of Europe. That's really not true.
We've heard that one before. What about liquidity, Keith? Are people actually cashing out any of this?
Liquidity is a little not very well explored topic, but the truth is almost all unicorns are private companies. And if you own shares in them, if you were fortunate enough to own shares in them, you can't really sell those shares.
But there is a secondary market. You can if you want, can't you?
The secondary market's highly regulated, both by the companies and by the investment agreements they've all made. So it's not that liquid, to be honest. So if you're in in one of these things, and you want liquidity, typically you have to IPO, sell the company, do a SPAC, or do a direct listing. And this is a really, really good piece about all of those different options and where things stand. The SPAC universe has stalled completely. Direct listings, you have to be an
Is that a euphemism, stalled, Keith, for disintegrated? Is it being exposed as a bit of a scam?
There's no real scam stories. I mean, maybe there's one or two on the fringes, but for the most part, it's to do with a technical detail. The way a SPAC happens is somebody with 300 million offers to merge with you and promises to raise another bunch of money in what's called a pipe. The institutional investors have stopped doing pipe.
Who's coming out with these terms? Pipe.
Private investment in a public entity. The pipes have stalled. So the people like Fidelity and the like are not investing in the pipes. So the SPACs can't get done. That's what's happening.
But does this reveal the fact that the SPACs was just a sort of a clever, sexy idea that doesn't really work?
I suspect that the SPAC is going to live on as a way for.
Well, aren't you doing some SPAC? Or weren't you trying to do a SPAC with one of your companies?
I'm not allowed to talk about that. So,
well, that means you are. But so there are lots of people still trying to do them. What's the problem? That the money guys have shut it down, or the entrepreneurs aren't comfortable with it?
The money guys have become uncomfortable with valuing companies based on their 2025 numbers, which is how a SPAC works.
And what about Chamath, one of your big heroes? I thought he was Mr. SPAC. Is he still doing it?
Chamath has actually done very well. If we go to Google Finance and you type in IPO, you will find this social capital header Sophia entity. And he has a whole bunch of SPACs. Now, a SPAC starts at $10. This today is at $9.86. So this tells you the SPAC value. You can buy Chamath's SPAC for 14 cents less than he created it for today, prior to it merging with something. And that tells you everything you need to know about the SPAC market.
Well, the SPAC market may be dead, But this show continues. You're all watching on Restream. You might be watching, though, in the future on Salesforce. Salesforce now is getting into the broadcasting, the streaming business, Keith.
Yeah, I thought it was a really interesting announcement by Salesforce.
Who are a smart company run by a particularly smart guy. So there's something here. What are they doing?
Well, this is actually about customer acquisition and advertising. You'll remember on previous shows, we've talked about the end of cross-site cookies that allow profiling to happen on consumers or internet users generally. Well, therefore, advertising is a lot less easy to target. And what Salesforce has concluded is the best way to get to know its customers and target them is by giving them content to engage with. And so Salesforce is basically replacing advertising, not totally, but in large part, by content marketing. And Salesforce Plus, with live streaming, is their chosen vehicle to do that. They want to become the best place for business streaming. It's interesting. John Furrier has been running something for a long time that does business-related streaming. Silicon Angle is his name. It's very good. John's done a great job. Salesforce is kind of coming into that space, and they could do worse than go and acquire John's company, actually. And I think what this means.
Well, maybe we should. You're friends with Steve Gilmore and some of the Salesforce guys. Maybe we should run this show on Salesforce.
Not impossible to contemplate that we might do that. I will say this: Salesforce doing this is a massive boost to that idea called the creator economy. What it tells you is every major company is going to have to become a creator and have its own content.
Yeah, I mean that's very attractive from my point of view. I'm not convinced. I mean, how much money are they actually throwing at this thing?
They've already got a team of 50, so it's not small, and they're planning to grow it to a couple of hundred.
Well, talking of teams, the Olympics is finished, and I was particularly seduced by West Indian runners with yellow hair, especially some of the women. But the West Indies is doing well in the digital Olympics too. You say that Jamaica's going digital this week, Keith.
Yeah, one of several now that are deciding to create digital currencies. They've already minted $287 million worth of their own currency and distributed it to citizens. And so think of this as just a non.
When you say, I mean, just step back on that. What does that actually mean? If you're a Jamaican citizen, what do you get and what can you do with this?
So if your employer can pay you in Jamaican currency and put it into your wallet on your.
So this isn't crypto. This is just fine. PayPal could do this or Square.
It's digital currency in that there's no physical equivalent. There's no notes and coins.
But it is. I mean, what is it? Dollar? Is it Jamaican currency or another currency?
Jamaican currency. And pretty much every central bank is looking at doing this.
So it's not really, but that's not really crypto, is it?
Well, it depends what you mean by crypto. Crypto just means that it's cryptographically safe.
Right. So it's. Yeah.
So it is kind of crypto.
So they're giving us a sort of a metaphorical, they're giving Jamaican citizens a metaphorical coin that they can use. But you're always the one that's telling me that crypto isn't a currency. So what we have here is crypto as a currency.
This is crypto as a currency, and that's what central banks can do because they produce currencies. By the way,
what's the difference between doing this and just printing a banknote and sending it to every Jamaican?
It's the same. It's the
same. What's the big deal?
There's no banknotes.
But the whole point of crypto, as we talked earlier about the privacy of the dollar, is it undermines the current financial system. So if the Jamaicans are doing this, it's not actually very radical. It's just digitalizing currency.
Well, the way to think about it is a Jamaican dollar will always be worth a Jamaican dollar, whether it's digital or physical. But a Bitcoin will vary in value up and down based on how much of the world's wealth gets put into it. And if all the world's wealth floods out of Jamaican dollars into Bitcoin, Jamaican dollar will always be a Jamaican dollar, but its exchange rate to the US dollar will decline. So if you think about money as a commodity, all money is a commodity, and each version of money has a relative value to other versions of money. What's really happening here is that the human race is deciding which version of money has the most long-term holding power and value.
I suspect the human race is deciding, although I'm not sure it's the human race, it's certain people are deciding that they're turning the world into a big Weimar Republic, which eventually will crash. Because at a certain point, when governments like the Jamaicans just issue digital coinage, at a certain point, you have inflation because there's nothing supporting it, right?
Well, you remember that book we talked about many months ago by the former head of the U.S. currency.
Yeah.
Her book says that's not true. She says that if you print more
That's
money,
ML. I've had her on my show. Modern monetary
MMT,
modern monetary theory.
So
Yeah,
her argument is that isn't true because for every amount of money produced, somebody will make something to sell to you in return for it, and therefore productivity will match money, and everyone will do well. So,
well, you missed a trick this week, Keith. You know what it was?
No.
You failed to make Jamaica your startup of the week, which you should have done. But anyway, they're my startup of the week. Who is your startup of the week?
Well, I couldn't really avoid this. There's three of them. Three private companies this week successfully closed funding rounds where they were valued at $10 billion or more. So the unicorn phenomenon, there's now a decacorn phenomenon. The first is TalkDesk, which is a digital version of a call center. The second is Figma, which is a developer tool for mocking and wireframing, apps and websites and the like.
So it's like a 3D tool.
Yeah, well, it could be 2D as well. And the third is well known to all of us, Reddit. They all raised money at valuations of 10 billion, which tells you that this phenomenon is not going away.
How can Reddit be valued at 10 billion? I mean, what's their business model?
They have two business models. One is advertising, and they have obviously
which is a shitty model
user base. And the second one is they have their own cryptocurrency, which you earn by commenting and liking and stuff.
That is a recipe for disaster. A Reddit cryptocurrency run by the Reddit community.
There you go.
The more I do this show, Keith, the more I believe in the end of the world. But maybe I'm just a pessimist and a miserable old fart. Finally, you got three Deca unicorns. What are they called?
Decacorns.
$10 billion company, or valued at 10 billion. At a certain point in this market, I guarantee you this market's going to crash. I mean, how are these companies worth 10 billion? How is a 3D company worth 10 billion?
Just because I care about my viewers, I'm going to tell you the answer. That we now have global infrastructure capable of distributing software or services to billions of people who will pay for them. Figma is a subscription model, for example. So is TalkDesk.
Do they all have a lot of revenue currently? I mean, they're not just startups, right?
No, they have revenue. And this is real companies with real scale and very large revenues. And it's possible to do that these days. One day, Now TV could have tens of millions of viewers.
One day, Now TV could be worth $10. Why aren't they going public then?
There's no need to. If you've got lots of revenue and private people will give you money at those valuations, the only reason to go public is
to cash out. What about the VCs? At a certain point, they want their return, and the employees want to buy their mansions in San Francisco.
So they will go public, but they'll go public when they're worth 30, 40 billion.
Right. And of these three, any particularly interesting in terms of new markets?
I'm interested in TalkDesk because I've got a service called Chat Center that tried to do what TalkDesk has successfully done, which is take the ability to receive a call and with either voice or chat or video and to service a customer without having to be in a big call center. So
But it's not AI; it's real people, is it, or is it all AI?
It's combined, a little bit of AI, but mostly real people.
Well, that is a huge sector, 230
Yeah.
million, 10 billion. Okay, finally, Keith, tweet of the week, which actually sort of touches on all the things we've been talking about today.
Yeah, it's amazing how that works. Maybe somebody knows what they're doing in this newsletter.
I think it's Apple. I think they are watching this and controlling you and I as well.
This is Benedict Evans, who used to be at Andreessen Horowitz and is now back in the UK. When you know a lot about a field, you know all the reasons it's hard to disrupt, and remember all the previous attempts at this new idea that failed. And you'll be right for 5 or 10 or 20 years. But then one day, ... And I put this in for you, Andrew, because you're the doubting Thomas always.
Well, I have to be compared to you. It's a good balance. You need a doubting Thomas.
It is a good balance.
I'm not as doubting as I seem.
But all three of those $10 billion companies, who would have thought that a kind of topic-based chat forum or a design tool for developers or a digital call center platform would be worth $10 billion? Because all of those things already existed.
Well, finally, Keith, is using Benedict Evans' wisdom, this privatization of the dollar. Do you think that the Circle is going to be one of these companies that one day will be? I mean, if they get it right, they'll be worth hundreds of billions, probably trillions.
Well, the real trick with Circle is how do they make money? Because they have the USDC and then it's backed by the dollar. The way they make money is in what's called DeFi, where there's a new phenomenon called staking. Staking is when I will stake $100,000 of USDC and promise to leave it alone for a year. And somebody will loan that out to borrowers for relatively high rates of interest. And I will get paid a proportion of that rate of interest for my stake. Staking can work in all different contexts. So my example is just one example. And so I think that if you are the bank, you get to make money by using money. And you can do that with digital money just as easily as you can with actual dollars. That's the future for them.
And where are we, Keith, finally, with Benedict Evans' wisdom when it comes to the field you're now trying to disrupt, venture capital? Benedict Evans, of course, being, as you say, an ex or current venture capitalist.
Yeah, that's my wife's article makes the point that the venture capital, and it's the same as Sam Lessin, and I agree with it, the middle is being killed. The big guys are moving backwards, and the small guys are sticking to their knitting and sometimes raising slightly bigger funds. And so venture capital is definitely being disrupted. The next stage is the if you like, the companyization of that. So, for example, a company got funded this week called Allocations. Allocations creates special purpose vehicles. It lets you and me give them money. They act as the venture capitalist, and we become their investors. And that's a company. So basically, individual stock picking by superstar venture capitalists is probably going away.
Well, if I was to rewrite Benedict Evans' tweet of the week, I would say, when you know a lot about a field, you know all the reasons it's hard to disrupt. Remember all the previous attempts at this new idea that failed. And you'll be right for 5 or 10 or 20 years. But then 1 week, Keith, that's all it takes to transform entire industries. That was the week for August the 13th. I hope you all have happy Friday the 13th, and we'll see you all again on August the 20th in a week's time, where everything you know about the world will have been radically transformed.
And by then, the first games in the new English Premier League.
Yeah, and Arsenal were losing 1-0 to Brentford. Well, before I came on this, I hope they lost, because that would certainly make my week, because I know Spurs is going to lose on Sunday.
Yeah, I definitely hope they lost.